Jacobin, I think, isn't meant to be a U.S.-based publication. It's meant to be an Anglophone publication. So I started it when I was, I guess, 20, just turning 21. And my background, though, was on the socialist left in the United States. I was the editor of the Young Democratic Socialists web publication from my senior year in high school, first year in college. And no one read us, but we had a core of some authors, had some experience with the process of editing. Then I started Jacobin just as an online publication, the idea being, well, fundamentally one of the ideas was outwardly directed to the rest of the world. Me and this core of writers and other people were part of an organization with only 5,000 people. Most of the people in the Democratic Socialists of America were over the age of 60. It was like a big donut hole. There was some people around 20, most people over 60, and then no one in between. There was like a lost couple generations. And I guess the thinking was, if these ideas are so compelling to us, if the ideas of a world without exploitation or oppression is so compelling and manage to take us from just our regular lives into these fringe corners of the left, then why should it only be reaching 5,000 people, especially in a country of 300 and at the time I guess 320 million people. So we meant to take fairly conventional socialist ideas and mainstream them, popularize them, and connect them to a wider audience. Then on the other hand, we had an internally directed goal, which is we still believed in the socialist project as a goal. We still believe that for all their flaws and the need to renovate some of our tactics and strategies, that trade unions and mass parties, the features of the left for the last 150 years, were still probably the best way to get there. So we were kind of fighting this internal battle within the left while at the same time trying to reach new people. And I think I myself am better at the latter than kind of the former. So it started off with an idea. Then the thinking was I would just create a online blog free of this organization that was a little bit looser and more eclectic, but nobody read it. So I think the first month we had about 636 unique visitors. So that's why I decided to launch it into print, because the thinking was the barrier to entry is too low for an online publication, so there's too much competition. But immediately if you launch into print, you'll get noticed and there'll be more attention paid. And the way it was funded essentially was vine to vine. Just, with the easy thing about running a magazine compared to any other form of publishing is that it's subscriptions. So if you subscribe to Jacobin, and let's say you give me £20 to subscribe to Jacobin, that's not £20 that I could spend all right away. It's basically £10 of liability, so the cost of fulfillment, then £10 you could spend. But if you project that you'll get other people to subscribe and you're going to lower your cost of goods and you could spend all the money all at once. So that's how Jacobin survived. We would just get 100, 200 subscribers, spend all the money to print one issue, then hope that between issues we would get 100, 200 more subscribers. But so that's the purpose, to disseminate socialist views and perspectives, which sometimes is investigative journalism, but more often than not, overwhelmingly, it's commentary and secondary analysis, or building off academic work produced in academia. So either we're building off primary source reporting done by larger journalistic outlets, or we are taking works produced, subsidized in academia by the young professors or graduate students in our networks, and we're paying them a small amount to just write a popularized version of a 10,000 word argument into 2,000 word arguments, which obviously is far from extremely popular, but we're within a niche which is dominated by lots of very obscure jargony writing. So by comparison, we seem very popular. So Tribune has embodied many politics over its lifespan. Tribune has become kind of a you could pick whatever era of Tribune you want to identify with. My own politics, I'm not ashamed to admit, is a Marxist politics, but one that would be comfortable on some parts of the labor left. So Tony Benn was a big influence, and others. Michael Foot had his good days and his bad days. But yeah, it's now, I think, more closely associated with obviously Corbyn and McDonnell and the new, or now I guess not so new parts of the labor left. But what we want to offer is not just boosterism, not just movement coverage saying everything is all right, onward and upward, we're gaining strength all the time, but be a step or two removed from politics, from day-to-day politics, and to actually look in the longer arc of things and saying, what are the actual prospects for a renewed left social democracy? What is the labor left, even or the leadership, thinking enough about the challenges that will come with state power, the need for kind of state and civil service reform, and all these other questions that typically labor hasn't asked? I guess a lot of it came down to feeling some sort of obligation not to let a socialist publication die. And I think now that we're showing our value and that we're reaching a lot of people online with Tribune and the issues are getting better and better, I think we're getting just more interest. There's around 18 Tribune reading groups, so I'm not sure all of them are permanent reading groups, but at least 18 sessions of reading groups have happened for the last two issues. We're getting connected in with people who, are looking for that kind of political education. And I think one thing about the British left compared to the U.S. left is that there's still more of a tradition of kind of rootedness in working class communities that doesn't quite exist in the same way in the U.S. And also, I think that over time, if we ever do get to the point of being profitable, I think we have a lot of work to do when it comes to the archives, kind of preserving this material. Nehru's first article that he ever wrote for a popular audience was in Tribune. The first culture editor of Tribune was George Orwell. Kenyatta. There's a lot of really incredible writing that's been lost. It's in the archives. And we have physical copies of these archives. I think we also have Michael Foot's desk in a warehouse, if anyone wants to bring a desk somewhere. I think having that sense of history and being connected to it is important for us, even though I think many of our editors and people involved are on the left wing of the Tribune tradition, though I think that there are, like I said, moments in Tribune's history that are quite in line with what we believe. There's a need for outlets to put out counters to right-wing smears and disinformation, and there's a need for rapid response, quick responses. There's a need for just the volume that the Canary does. I think it plays a role. You could complain about individual articles or individual parts of the model, but I think overall, would I want to snap my fingers and have no Canary? No, of course not. So I think, but it does something very different that I would want Tribune to do, both in style, tone, quantity of material, the way it analyzes things. I don't think our role is just to defend everything that's going on here on the labor left or with the labor movement here or whatnot, to be kind of critical friends and to be able to analyze things when things go wrong. So obviously you could go in the wrong direction with your criticism. I think probably Hobsbawm and Stuart Hall went too far in their criticism of the Bennites in the 80s. But one thing I don't want to get into these debates, but they were asking many of the right questions. I think they came to the wrong conclusions. And I think that being willing to challenge conventional wisdom on both the left and right is important, and we're better equipped to do it than Canary. And when it comes to open democracy, that's a good liberal venue that makes space sometimes for people on the left, and I think that's fine too. But I think there's a need for our own outlets that are driven and committed to a vision of socialist internationalism, which I think is a distinct tradition. But yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily want to just have debates, though. We want to figure out. So neither Jacobin or Tribune or any of these other publications are line publications, but they are box publications. So you figure out what are the common, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Where do you draw? What are the parameters of your politics? And you have vigorous debate within that box. So the goal isn't debate in and of itself. The goal is to obviously make interventions, but you want enough dynamicism that people are making interventions from different perspectives. I think actually Tribune's view is a fairly conventional. I mean, I would imagine that everyone involved with Tribune, for example, like what's their stance on the initial Brexit vote? What's the stance now? I think you could probably sum up, despite the different perspectives, as everyone probably would have voted Remain because the campaign was being led, the Leave campaign was being led from the right. But the long-standing position of socialists has been opposition to the European Union and the broader process of European integration. And I think the general stance laid out has been the need to figure out some sort of program that could reach people, but reaching people doesn't necessarily mean just chasing Lib Dem voters and others, but it also doesn't mean adopting kind of the rhetoric and posturing of those in the Leave camp. I mean, I personally believe in something that in certain contexts you could call open borders. I think it's pretty terrible politics to call it open borders, but it depends, like, what's your perspective? In other words, if we need to dismantle a lot of the security regimes around borders, but obviously we need a way to incorporate people into existing welfare states so they know their labor rights, so they're, but when people are coming here to work, they're creating value. And I think we need to fight against the narrative of the right, which is false scarcity. In a lot of studies, this is the case for economic migrations. But you can understand in neoliberal terms like that, or you can understand in just like classic Marxist terms of what happens when people are exploited in a workplace under capitalism. Surplus labor value is created. It's not a zero-sum game. They're not just sucking away wealth from native-born workers. And if you have the right policies in place, any of this extra wealth that's being created could be redistributed to people in low-wage sectors that are maybe bearing the brunt of wage competition, possibly bearing the brunt of wage competition. So as far as actual politics, how do you translate that into popular politics? I think the goal is to fight the narrative of false scarcity and make immigration a less of a priority for people. So we want people who might be concerned about immigration to have immigration as their number 3 issue. And we want labor to so convincingly, win over people to the idea that they're better on defending the NHS, they're better on jobs. So who cares that they're really bad, in their perspective, like not great on immigration because, I'll vote for them anyway. I think that's enough for voters, downplaying the immigration and winning over these people. When it comes to like party cadre, you want people in the Labour Party won over to a international vision and solidarity with migrants and refugees. But when it comes to voters, like I would gladly take the votes of just about anyone as long as you're not compromising your own program and your own values.